The Andromeda Strain, 1971, wasn't just another science fiction movie about killer germs from space. It was the film where they actually suffocated a monkey on camera with ASPCAA approval.
Reports is a little ahead of the initial issue of the film.
The composer recorded real laboratory sounds at NASA, and the director refused to hire any movie stars because he thought audiences wouldn't believe them as scientists. These are 14 facts about the most scientifically accurate disaster movie ever made. 1. Robert Wise, cast 0 stars. On purpose, director Robert Wise made the deliberate decision not to cast any big-name actors in the Andromeda Strain, and he had a very specific reason. In behind-the-scenes interviews, Wise explained that he would have had a hard time believing a major star like Gregory Peck playing a scientist. The film needed to feel like a documentary about real people dealing with a real crisis, and Hollywood glamour would have destroyed that authenticity. Instead, he assembled a cast of excellent character actors who audiences didn't immediately recognize. Arthur Hill, James Olsen, Kate Reed, and David Wayne were all skilled performers, but none of them were household names. This casting strategy meant the high-tech laboratory sets and scientific procedures became the real stars of the movie. Without celebrity faces to distract audiences, viewers could focus entirely on the terrifying biological threat and the race to stop it. 2. They actually suffocated a monkey with carbon dioxide. The most disturbing scene in the Andromeda Strain shows a lab monkey being exposed to the deadly organism and dying instantly. What audiences didn't know was that the monkey really was suffocating on camera. The production placed the monkey in a cage with normal air, then put that cage into a set filled with carbon dioxide. When a mechanical hand opened the cage door, CO2 rushed in and the monkey lost consciousness within seconds. Assistant director James Fargo stood just off camera wearing scuba gear, holding a second oxygen source. The moment the monkey went limp, Fargo grabbed it and revived it with oxygen. The whole procedure was approved and supervised by the ASPCA, who were present during filming. You can actually see a shadow moving toward the monkey as it collapses, which is Fargo rushing in to save it. The production only got one take because they couldn't put the animal through that again. 3. Michael Crichton volunteered as an extra for $40. Author Michael Crichton made his only film cameo in the adaptation of his own book, and it happened completely by accident. Director Robert Wise was filming in Pasadena and needed medical student types as extras to fill a hospital scene. From the crowd gathered around the set, a 6'9" giant stepped forward and volunteered. Crichton told Wise he could play a medical student because he'd been training for the role for 4 years. He was literally still in medical school when he wrote the novel. Wise wisely put him on the payroll at $40 a day, making the wealthy young author of the best-selling book work as a day player in his own movie. Crichton appears as a bearded surgeon in the scene where Dr. Hall gets pulled from surgery to report to the wildfire facility. It was the only time Crichton ever appeared in an adaptation of his work. 4. Steven Spielberg was Crichton's tour guide at Universal. When Michael Crichton visited Universal Studios during production in 1970, his tour guide was a complete nobody who'd just been given a 7-year television contract. That nobody was Steven Spielberg, who was working in TV at the time and got assigned to show the author around. Neither of them had any idea they'd later create one of the biggest blockbusters in film history together. 20 years later, Spielberg bought the rights to Crichton's novel Jurassic Park and turned it into one of the highest-grossing films of all time. They also collaborated on creating the TV series EER, which was based on Crichton's personal experiences as a young physician. The show won over 100 Emmy Awards and became one of the most successful medical dramas ever made. 5. The Wildfire Lab set cost over $300,000. The underground wildfire laboratory was described at the time as one of the most elaborately detailed interiors ever built for a film. The set cost more than $300,000 to construct, which was an enormous amount in 1971. The largest set was the Time Travel Center for the Scientists' Operations, requiring 93 carpenters and 57 painters just to build. Production designer Boris Levin created a futuristic environment that looked both advanced and believable, with rusted catwalks traversing large open spaces. Director Wise insisted that everything on the set had to be real and functional. The computer terminals with their light pens, the electron microscopes, every piece of equipment actually worked. This wasn't just set dressing meant to look scientific. Wise wanted real scientists to look at the film and recognize authentic laboratory procedures and equipment. 6. Gil Mel recorded actual lab sounds. At JPL Composer, Gil Mel didn't want a traditional orchestral score for the Andromeda Strain. Instead, he created the first all-electronic soundtrack released in America, and he went to extraordinary lengths for authenticity. Mel visited the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA and recorded actual sounds from their equipment. He captured the hums, beeps, and electronic noises of real scientific instruments, then incorporated them into his avant-garde electronic score. The result was unlike anything American audiences had heard before. While British viewers were familiar with electronic music from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, this was shocking and alien to American moviegoers in 1971. The soundtrack was so unusual that it was released on a hexagonal-shaped vinyl record with a silver foil cover, making it one of the most elaborate and expensive soundtrack packages in history. 7. Real laboratory scenes were shot at Caltech. Not everything in the Andromeda Strain was built on a soundstage. Some of the most important scientific sequences were filmed at actual laboratories. Real laboratory scenes using a spectrograph were shot at the California Institute of Technology, one of the world's leading research universities. Director Wise wanted absolute authenticity in how the scientists examined the alien organism, so he brought his cameras into real working labs. The spectrograph scenes show actual equipment being used by the actors, not Hollywood props meant to look scientific. This commitment to realism extended throughout the production, with Wise consulting real scientists about every detail. When screenwriter Nelson Gidding suggested changing one of the novel's male scientists to a female character, Wise asked the opinion of several scientists before agreeing. They were unanimously enthusiastic about the idea. 8. The opening pretends to be a real government document. The film starts with an acknowledgement message that deliberately blurs the line between fiction and reality. It claims to have received generous help from people attached to Project Scoop at Vandenberg Air Force Base and the Wildfire Laboratory in Flat Rock, Nevada. The message states that the documents presented are soon to be made public and do not jeopardize national security. This was completely invented. There was no Project Scoop, no Wildfire Laboratory, and no real incident. Michael Crichton loved this technique and used it as a creator thumbprint throughout his career. By framing the story as if it were a real government report being declassified, the film immediately created an unsettling sense of plausibility. Audiences walked into theaters genuinely unsure whether they were about to watch a documentary or science fiction. 9. The fake bibliography fooled. The screenwriter Nelson Gidding read numerous science fiction books while researching his adaptation. To further educate himself, he attempted to look up every item listed in the bibliography section of Michael Crichton's original novel. To his surprise, he discovered they were all completely made up. The book is a work of fiction, and several items in the bibliography were actually credited to characters from the novel itself. Gidding took this lesson to heart and imaginatively created most of the technobabble used in the film, especially for the highly detailed printed props and the station-wide announcements heard throughout the lab. This attention to detail in creating fake scientific jargon helped make the impossible scenario feel disturbingly real. Every technical term sounded just plausible enough that audiences couldn't tell what was real science and what was invented. 10. They used a reversed anamorphic lens. For the fainting scene near the climax, when Dr. Hall becomes dazed and nearly unconscious, the film needed a visual way to show his disorientation. Director Wise and cinematographer Richard Klein created the effect using an old CinemaScope lens, but they reversed the anamorphic optical squeeze during the shot. This gave the distorted, spinning sensation of Hall losing his equilibrium and about to faint. It was exactly the kind of innovative camera technique that defined the production. Klein was willing to experiment and try new approaches, working closely with Wise to find visual solutions for abstract concepts. The film needed to show audiences what it felt like to be overwhelmed by exhaustion and panic in a high-stakes crisis, and technical tricks like the reversed anamorphic lens made those internal experiences visible on screen. 11. The 3D lab diagram didn't exist. Yet, one of the film's most impressive visual effects was the computerized 3D diagram of the underground multi-level wildfire laboratory. The problem was that in 1971, the technology to create such a visual didn't actually exist. Visual effects supervisor Douglas Trumbull had to invent a solution from scratch. They projected an image of each level of the lab onto a piece of cardboard, which was then moved slowly while the camera rolled to create a transparent exposure. Once each level had been filmed separately, they layered all the shots over one another to produce the final 3D model. The effect looked completely convincing, like an advanced computer graphic that wouldn't actually be possible for another decade. Audiences had no idea they were watching an elaborate camera trick involving cardboard and multiple exposures. They just saw futuristic technology that seemed decades ahead of its time. 12. Universal paid $250,000 for the film rights. Universal Pictures bought the film rights to the Andromeda Strain for $250,000 in 1969, which was a substantial amount for a first novel by an unknown author. But Michael Crichton's book had become an immediate sensation, partly because the author was still in his 20s and had written it while in medical school. The novel established Crichton as a major voice in science fiction and created an entirely new genre called the technothriller. Tom Clancy would later refer to Crichton as the father of the technothriller, and the term stuck. The success of both the book and the film meant that any newly discovered biological agent tended to be called an Andromeda strain. The term became synonymous with potential pandemics, and in the early years of AIDS, the virus was often incorrectly cited as an Andromeda strain that Crichton had somehow predicted. 13. The film got 2 Oscar nominations, but won nothing. The Andromeda Strain received 2 Academy Award nominations for its technical achievements. It was nominated for Best Art Direction and Best Film Editing, recognizing the elaborate production design and tight pacing. Both nominations lost to other films. Best Art Direction went to Nicholas and Alexandra, while Best Film Editing went to The French Connection. The film also received a nomination for science fiction's Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation in 1972, competing against works that appeared in calendar year 1971. Despite not winning any major awards, the film was a box office success. Produced on a relatively high budget of $6.5 million, it grossed over $12 million in North America and became the 16th highest grossing film of 1971. 14. A female scientist replaced a male character. From the book in Michael Crichton's original novel, all 4 scientists were men. Screenwriter Nelson Gidding suggested changing Dr. Peter Leavitt to the female Dr. Ruth Leavitt, but director Wise initially resisted the idea. He worried the change would make the character decorative and largely useless, like Raquel Welch's role in Fantastic Voyage from 1966. When Gidding explained his actual vision for the character, Wise decided to ask real scientists what they thought. They were unanimously enthusiastic about having a woman scientist portrayed as an equal member of the team. Kate Reid's performance proved Wise's initial fears completely wrong. Her Dr. Leavitt was peppery, brilliant, and essential to solving the crisis. She wasn't there for romance or sex appeal. She was just one of the film's players, a real scientist doing real work, which was revolutionary for 1971. If you made it through all 14 facts, hit subscribe and let me know which behind-the-scenes details shocked you the most. Was it the monkey suffocation or the fake bibliography? See you next time